So one of the biggest things that can make or break, and I would say I would probably argue any company, but I can only speak on my own, is culture. Nothing more powerful than a culture that's aligned and on board with the vision and direction of the company.
Welcome to Get Unstuck and On Target, the weekly podcast that offers senior leaders insights and strategies to not only lead with confidence and vision, but also to achieve groundbreaking results. I'm your host, Mike O'Neill. I coach top-level executives on the power of ethical leadership to forge teams to be as united as they are effective. In each episode, join me for insightful conversations with leaders just like you, providing practical advice to help you get unstuck and propel you and your company forward. Let's get started. Joining me is Eric Wirks. Eric is a serial entrepreneur and founder of Wirks Moving and Storage. In 2009, Eric started off with one truck, and then he had 10 different job titles. Now, they are a major player, having one of the largest moving and storage companies in the greater Atlanta area. I'm interested in bringing Eric on because I think folks who listen to this podcast know I am drawn to entrepreneurs. There's something about entrepreneurs that I think many of us have interest in. And so I've asked Eric to kind of share a little bit about his journey. So welcome, Eric.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, Eric, I'm going to let you tell the story because you can obviously tell it better than I did. But your decision to go into moving and storage, it was on the heels of kind of a setback. Why don't we set the stage? Prior to starting that, you had a kind of a setback that kind of meant you had to start again, did you not?
Correct. Big picture. I'm originally from a very lower middle class, around the poverty line, small town in Ohio, and I had friends that would come down here in Metro Atlanta area every summer to work at one of the railroad's construction companies. And when I was 21, right before I turned 22, I kind of followed them. I had been attending Kent State University in Ohio. Mm-hmm. I was studying finance. I finished right around 3 years as far as a credit value. So my intention was to always go back to school, transfer everything down here, and finish my degree. I started as a summer job I got in the moving and storage industry. And I was making $9 an hour. Mm. At that point in time. This has been like 2004, 2005. At that point in time, $9 an hour was kind of what the starting wage was, at least in that industry. And kind of fell in love with it, kind of ran with it. One thing worked out to another. I obviously didn't go back and finish my degree. I got an opportunity to be a terminal service contractor. It's kind of like an owner-operator standpoint, to where you run, it's like you have your own small business within a giant corporate business. And they would feed me and sub me work. I was the youngest person in that, and they were at the time the largest privately owned van line corporate moving company in the entire world. And I was the youngest person that they had ever hired and contracted with to do something like this. Because at that time, I had just turned 23. And I ran with it. I did so well that they eventually gave me a key to an office, my own workstation, my own section within their corporate headquarters, where I could operate my business within their business. And it was very interesting because you had people there that were more than twice my age, who had been doing a version of a smaller version when I had accomplished there within a year. And I got some bad vibes about that. You had individuals that were doing a certain thing for 20 plus years, and here's this really, really young kid, 23 years old, who came in and within a year's time was able to kind of do something that, in perspective, I'm not a mind reader. One, they never were able to accomplish, or two, they never wanted to pursue to accomplish. And so I ran with that. And at the same time, though, so how does 100% my company start in 2009? Well, we all know what happened in 2008. And I'm probably 26 at the time. And, I was doing a lot of things right, but the one thing that I was not doing was I was not living below my means. There were certain things in my personal life where I did not have financial discipline. I had never been through something like that. And the funny thing is that my dad had always told me about preparing for things like that because he's 35 years older than me.
Okay.
So he had been through many circumstances like that. There was, the gas crisis in the 70s, the housing situation in the 80s, the crash in the 90s, things that he experienced that heck, in the 80s, I was a toddler. In the 90s, I was middle school, grade school, middle school, kind of in the 90s. So I didn't really feel and experience those things, which probably people who were adults at that time really did, So that was my first real experience of going through something like that, 100% on my own, as a grown man in his mid-20s. So it hit me like a ton of bricks. I had lost everything. I had some things repossessed for me. I ended up being around $20-some thousand in debt. Got evicted from my condo that I was living in. And next thing I know, I am living in an extended stay hotel. Moving's all I knew. So I had a couple trucks that I owned outright that I leased out to other companies just to have some income coming in. I was working under the table at a site where I'd get. Sometimes I was being taken advantage of, where I'd only be making $10 an hour, even though I know I'm worth more than that. But I never had an entitlement complex. You do what you got to do at the time. So I eventually repossess those trucks because them people stopped making payments. And then I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with these equipment assets? And that's kind of how Wirks Moving Storage started. I got one truck back, and then I had saved around $2,000 to $3,000, and I just went for it. And I call it, looking back now, I call it maybe the gift of desperation, because there was if I fail, we'll just go here. No, if I fail, I starve.
Yeah.
I don't eat. I'm homeless. So I had a lot of incentive and motivation, and it took a toll. And I'm always when I tell people about this, I'm always very straightforward. It was probably one of the hardest, most miserable things that I've ever experienced in my life, especially in the first 18 months. A light day was working 15 hours.
Yeah.
No exaggeration. I had 10 plus different job titles. I had put on 20 pounds. I had ruined a relationship I was in. I was smoking over a pack of cigarettes a day, not handling things constructively, getting things done, but not handling things constructively. And thank God, I could never do this at my age now, to be in my early 40s. But thank God that we're really resilient at an early age, because I was not living a healthy lifestyle. I was not mentally sound. I was mental, emotional, physical wreck. And then one day, as I would learn then the hard way on so many things, things started coming together. And it's turned into something that I never thought could happen. So that's kind of in a nutshell, kind of how this came about.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. There's a tendency when people listen to successful entrepreneurs is they key in on their current success. And there's a tendency to kind of gloss over what it takes to get there. And I appreciate your openness, because I think that's what really informs us. And as for those who inspired to own a business, start and own a business, that it's hard. It's hard under the best of circumstances. What drove you struck me as being, if nothing else, tenacity, but you referred to that as the gift of desperation. You had to do what you had to do where you could just simply survive. Now, let's look back. You've been able to build this moving and storage business into something much, much bigger. But if I understand correctly, you share with me, you probably are not directly involved in the day-to-day of that business currently. Is that correct?
Correct. I am a true chairman of the board. I don't take a salary. I take distributions. I have a CEO, and in fact, we just had a true board meeting, literally 6 or 7 days ago.
Okay.
So I am 100% hands off. To me, a CEO is really that. A CEO is supposed to be that visionary, that 1,000-foot view. I went from the 1,000-foot view to the 10,000-foot view. And then my only concern is her vision and direction in line of where my long-term vision, are we on that track? Big picture. There's a lot more you can go into with that, but we could probably have a couple-hour conversation just talking about that.
Well, part of my interest in bringing you on the podcast is not only the fact that you kind of scrapped together what money you had, you went and repossessed vehicles, you started building on something you knew something about, and you built it to a point that you actually did. Before we move into your other business pursuits, let's talk about that transition from owner to CEO to chairman. A lot of people tend to just kind of, oh, that's great. But did you find that letting go to become that chairman, to let that CEO do what is it, did you find that challenging?
For me, no.
Okay.
I do know it's one of the biggest struggles of entrepreneur. Well, one of the biggest struggles of entrepreneurs is feeling confident in delegating and handing things off. There are much easier paths to that I know now that I did not know then. One simple thing is getting everything out of your head and documented. It's easier to have talented people manage processes than it is to just manage talented people. It's unscalable. Learn that the hard way, and also learn that from other people's struggles. I've learned a lot of things through my own pain, and I've learned many things through other people's pain over the years. Because you don't know what you don't know until you do.
Yes.
So that was and then it was just finding the right talent and incentivizing talent the right way. And another thing too is there's things put in place that everyone's held accountable. Like everybody in our organization has a checklist and end of day report that they submit. And it goes up the chain. Like everybody's like, call it like accountability documentation looks different. Because if something goes wrong or something needs fixed or something needs changed, we need to identify the source. I told you the other day, we talked, like, one of the things that I do not like to do is throw darts at anything. I want to make decisions on sound, accurate data that's as close to as accurate as it can be. Now, keep in mind, you don't want to get in a situation where you get a paralysis by analysis. Been guilty of that too. We'll also learn to navigate that the hard way. But is it the information? Is it accurate enough?
Yes.
To make the right decision. So all things that I've learned. There's going to be many more things that I continue to learn. Hopefully those things are learned without much pain and difficulty involved. Typically, I don't want to speak for myself, but typically people are their own worst enemy. So.
Well, I see that time and time again, particularly in my coaching work, and that is, it's what gets in our head that oftentimes is the biggest barrier to future success. You have shared that you learn from personal setbacks, you've learned from other people's mistakes, but you also said that one of the challenges you needed to do to be able to move forward is to get out of your head those things operationally, to almost systematize what is it you're trying to do, have accountability. But I also keyed in on something, this is part of your LinkedIn profile. This what caught my attention that led to me reaching out to you to come on the podcast. And you said, quote, "I have the best business family anyone could ask for." Now, it sounds as if that you didn't start with the best family. You had to kind of assemble this family. But maybe I'm reading that wrong. How did you get to the point where you can say what you say about being the best business family?
So one of the biggest things that can make or break, and I would say I would probably argue any company, but I can only speak on my own, is culture. Nothing more detrimental than a toxic culture. Nothing more powerful than a culture that's aligned and on board with the vision and the direction of the company. And some of that stuff, I learned over time, and some of them things like, and I call it foundational things. I didn't have a vision statement from day one. I didn't have core values from day one. Like, these things came about in the company, like, when I learned, oh, these are really important. I share this a lot, and this is another thing I see with entrepreneurs, and I'm also guilty of this. There's nothing more important than foundational stuff in a company. I know that now, but my mind, I want to work on C, okay, but I'll neglect A and B. But in order for C to be at its best, A and B have to be solid. And you can call A and B or foundational stuff, and so I've learned that, and that's just where my mind goes. So that's the caveat. Like, I have a visionary mindset. I'm always like thinking about C and D and E, and like, this is how my brain works. I get real excited about that. That's what I call the sexiness of businesses. It's the foundational stuff that's like the minutia, the things that aren't glamorous, the things that, like, sometimes, like, you don't want to do, or that anyone doesn't want to do. Especially it's more challenging to, at least it was for me, to focus on that stuff when I wasn't even sure where I was going.
You have kind of baked into your processes within that business accountability, by which literally on a daily basis, people are reporting what is it they got accomplished. I'm going to make the assumption that the accountability reports, if you would, help the organization stay aligned with the key objectives, stay aligned with those core values, to maybe stay aligned with the anticipated vision. Have you found that the accountability part, does that help in achieving the culture and maintaining the culture that you're trying to build and maintain?
Yes. One of the things we always, a lot of times, who gets you there at a certain level can't get you to the next level. There are decisions, and they're unavoidable. There are decisions that leadership or company owners or whoever who hold those positions, there are tough decisions they have to make. The simplest way, like, that I can kind of like articulate it is that if the tough decisions need to be made, any of us want to be able to go to bed at night and sleep knowing that we exhausted every resource possible to set that individual up for success, and have them on a path to where they want to achieve their goals. So almost sort of like, if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, it's on them.
Yes.
And that's a core value that I live by. Extreme ownership, and luckily I started to really learn this really well in my early 20s, that one day it just kind of like clicked, like, oh, every single thing good and bad in my life is a result of, I play a big part in that. Everything. I'm usually the number one catalyst of that. So I feel like the minute that people can understand that, the better they're going to be off. And so anytime there's a situation or something that's not positive, myself and leadership, we look at ourselves first, right? Did we drop the ball? Do we have a gap? Is there something we're missing? Like, are we not delivering our end to this individual? When your team knows that's kind of how you operate, like, that's a net positive.
Yes.
Same time too, like, people usually, at least we found, people usually don't quit jobs because of compensation. They quit jobs because of bad leadership.
Yes.
And when you have a great culture, it's amazing. At least it's for us. Like when you have a great culture, and then someone who's just a great interviewer, they like we have all our protocols and processes, and like they slip through the cracks. The culture will let you know really quickly that this person is probably not going to be a good fit. It does not take long because hiring, recruiting, onboarding, training, that's expensive.
Yes.
So the better you can get that dialed in, the more it's going to affect your bottom line.
Eric, you said something that kind of caught my attention. I think, I came out of a corporate HR background, and you're talking about making sure that expectations are known. If expectations are not being met, the employee needs to know that. They need to own it. I've always kind of said that if it doesn't work out, the person cannot or will not make the changes necessary. It's less the company terminating the employee, and the employee, if this is done right, kind of terminates themselves, because what they basically is they own what was expected of them, and failure to do so means that if you have to make that difficult decision, you've kind of exhausted. Have we done everything we can to prevent this? And the answer is yes. And the employee hasn't. Then when you do have to part company, not only can y'all do so as a company with a clear conscience, but I have found at least the departing employee they may not in the moment, but they'll acknowledge they weren't living up to their capabilities. And what I'm hearing you say is that from a culture standpoint is that you can get the right qualifications, but if the fit is not there, if they do not fit the culture, it sticks out. And that's one of the strengths of a strong culture. It becomes the filter in which you look at everything.
No, 100%. And then we're not perfect either. Like sometimes we've got the right person, but we have them on the wrong seat.
Yes.
In the bus. There are people in our organization now who do an amazing job who are in positions that we did not hire them for.
Yeah.
But that goes back to but to piggyback on what you were saying, but that goes back to extreme ownership. Like whenever there's a situation that you want to change, and typically people don't change things because they're positive. We take accountability. We look at ourselves first. We are the last ones to point the finger at anybody else. It's about narrowing down, like, where is the issue? And we start up top and we work our way down. Learn that the hard way, as well. Like I said, what I know now, I wish I knew then. So.
But with that learning though, you pay it forward. I know you're really involved with mentoring, and you see the value of mentoring. You've been mentored in your experience. Perhaps you still are. Eric, I introduced you as a serial entrepreneur. We've really only talked about one of your business pursuits. But when you moved into a chair role with that company, that enable you, if you so choose, to pursue other interests. What is it about other business opportunities that appeal to you?
Another way to diversify, without getting in depth of what other stuff I do. It's kind of interesting to me, like, because so the moving and storage business is a seasonality business. There's no question of like what's going on in the economy now is definitely affecting that. But At the same time, like I'm in other things to where they do better typically when things like this happen. So it's a liability play. It's a diversification play. Also as well too is that like, and it was another reason why I stepped away as CEO as well, was that like, and this was my own taking my own accountability, is that because I was in I call it a quality problem, a position with other things I'm into that are doing very well.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing my own organization disservice because I was not 100% all in. I was not being the CEO that company needed.
Yeah.
So it was a really big self-reflection that like, hey, I have somebody who's completely qualified to do this, who will actually do a better job than me because they can be 100% in where I can't. So like, it's another net positive because I choose to live my life the way I do and take that self-reflection and just get like humble and then really, really honest with myself that I can make decisions like that to where other people, it might be challenging. This goes back to like the delegation handing off. It's usually a pride and ego thing or a fear thing, or it's just a fear. It's usually, like I said, speaking for myself, it's usually if I'm having a hard time making the right decision, it's usually pride, ego, or fear involved in that. So,
one thing that caught my attention when you're describing this is you've been intentional. You know the seasonality of your core business. You've been attracted to seasonalities that help kind of fill that. I get it. Another question is, do you find as you move into these other business interests, does that open up your eyes in a way that you might get some fresh perspectives on your core business derived from some of these other businesses that you have been part of?
Absolutely.
Okay. So does that stimulate you as an entrepreneur to keep you fresh and on top of your game?
Yes, especially when things are in different stages. I can revert back to doing things that I know how to do, but I haven't done in a while. Like almost like a refresher course. And it gives me different perspective. That's probably one of the most valuable things. Yeah, and the way that I'm wired is, don't be wrong. Like I'm a purpose-driven individual. I'll never retire.
Mm-hmm.
Retirement to me is always working on my own terms.
Yes.
So maybe I'm retired now. I don't know. But like I am driven by purpose. I'm driven by creation. I'm driven by like, I'm a competitive guy by nature. Like I get so much fulfillment that entrepreneurship brings me that I just can't imagine like ever stop doing it. Like whether I believe in building to sell. So whether I sell a company or I do some type of like PE partnership or whatever, I'm either going to be more involved in that or I'm going to go do something else.
Yes. That's
another thing too. Like that I thought about a lot too, is because like I have a lot of good friends who have sold businesses, and a big thing that happens to entrepreneurs too is that they sell a business and they didn't have a plan in place of what they're going to do after. And I've known entrepreneurs who go like severe depression, lack of purpose. So like there's just another life lesson that I've been able to learn through other people's actions that like, oh, I need to think about that. Maybe I better, so like, I'm always open-minded. I'm always listening. I'm always teachable. And I've learned to be that way. It's served me very well.
But you share a life lesson, whereas you found you or your organization stuck. And when that happened, what did it take to get unstuck?
Yeah. Just like recently, like things shifted drastically in the moving and storage industry in fourth quarter of 2022, first quarter of 2023. And here's a situation where like a little bit of arrogance got us in trouble. We're data nerds at our company. Like we're always looking at data for everything. So we're looking at all these financial forecasts and housing market forecasts and all this stuff, all these trends, and the data's telling us what to do. And we got a little bit arrogant and still trying to go on this crazy growth path, hired all this mid-level management, increased all this, so drastically increased our monthly break-even costs, and it didn't happen. What the data told us was going to happen is what happened, and we had to pivot really, really fast. Well, as fast as we could. So one, we could identify the problems, and also two, we had some big hiccups happening in the sales department. So perfect storm. We identified everything that was the issue. Part of that being us and how we approached it. And then know the direction to take. The challenge is that even though the issue is identified, the solution's in place, these things don't get corrected overnight. So we're on the path of correcting everything, restabilization, all the above. But we're still watching money hemorrhage, cash flows going down. So after first quarter, we were dang near $500,000 in the red. And then through just tenacity, persistence, and just staying on course and trying to stay as emotionally calm as possible. And I'll be completely transparent. I had some moments where I was a little bit emotionally unhinged.
Yep.
To sit here and say otherwise, I'd be a liar. But I had good people around me to really help me navigate that. And then we made all that money back, got back in the black, and are doing substantially well again. And a ton of companies in my industry are not in the position we're in. And there's going to be a lot of moving and storage companies or maybe people or maybe a lot of businesses who are also greatly affected by the housing market that are probably not going to survive.
Eric, because we had an opportunity to speak before we set this recording date, I knew that you could speak on a wide variety of topics. I appreciate your willingness to come and to share a little bit about your story. I hope that the folks who are listening will learn from and draw inspiration from. And I just want to say thank you for doing that.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I really enjoyed it.
I do have a question for our listeners, and that is, are people following you because they have to or because they want to? As a leadership coach, I work with executives who have a track record of success behind them, but they're now feeling stuck. They're frustrated because they're finding that with each level of success that follows, the bar gets set even higher. They're discouraged because what worked in the past, as Eric just said, it's no longer working. My clients, despite all their successes in the past, they're lacking the clarity, the confidence to make the decisions needed to get to that next level. So through coaching, we work together to unravel those hidden blind spots, to challenge those limiting beliefs and establish a strong sense of accountability. So if you're feeling stuck, or if that describes you or someone you know, let's talk. Head over to bench-builders.com to schedule a call. So I want to thank you for joining us, and I hope you have picked up on some quick wins from Eric. They'll help you get unstuck and on target. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Get Unstuck and On Target. I hope you've gained insights to help you lead with confidence and drive your organization forward. Remember, at Bench Builders, we're committed to your success, your leadership excellence, and your strategic growth. If you've enjoyed our conversation today, please leave a review, rate, and subscribe to keep up with our latest episodes. This show really grows when listeners like you share it with others. Who do you know who needs to hear what we talked about today? Until next time, I encourage you to stay focused on the target and continue to break new ground on your leadership path.